Here we are again, Privateer Diaries. Um, the last time we spoke, you had just come off the back of a really successful US block, and you're about to head into three races, three countries, Gralloch in Scotland, Raz in Ireland, and then you're going to be heading over to the US for Unbound. I'm looking at your Unbound t-shirt, bit of a giveaway. So we're now talking post Unbound. Where are you right now?
I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I'm here for my mid-season break, which is feels well overdue. As you said, the start of the season was like insanely, crazily successful. Lots of traveling, lots of everything. So I'm here just relaxing now. But yeah, it's those three races you just mentioned, Gralloch, Ros, and Unbound were three of the biggest target races of the year. Gralloch not so much, but the Ros and Unbound, like the goal was win yellow at the Ros, and then Unbound is quite hard to set a target for, but just have a good clean race and be racing for the win or in the leading group. And yeah, it's safe to say that hasn't happened. The successes of my first US trip have very much been it's been like a thud on the drop down to reality of what it's like to be a pro bike racer because as you said, when it's going well, it's you're on cloud nine, but all it takes is a couple of punches and a crash. And yeah, yeah, the thud down to earth hurts.
Yeah. So take us back then to well, let's do them in sequence. So Gralloch, Gralloch, you headed up to Scotland. Um, Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so I think it's worth mentioning that I first pulled out of the tracker, which was probably Europe's biggest bike race. The first week back after my US block, I was very tired, pretty burnt out, and it just seemed to make sense to not race it with big targets in mind. So I pulled out the tracker, had a bit of a break, and then heading up to the Gralloch, I didn't really know how I'd feel. Um, like physically, I had quite a lot of stuff going on off the bike with work, and I shocked myself actually at Growler. The first, well, as we'll come on to for the first few K anyway. It wasn't really going fast enough for my liking, and I just first climb, I went to the front and kind of drove the pace, made the front split, was comfy, everything going well. Maybe a front group of 20 or so, 25. And then maybe 40 minutes into the race, I have the biggest slash in my tire going, and however many plugs and tubes and anything I tried to put in, ultimately it was just a 25, 30-minute walk to the closest road and calling in the taxi of my parents to take me back to the start because my tire was finished, and that was Gralloch over and done with, which was disappointing because I mean the Gralloch is known for being tire slashing, similar to Unbound as we'll come on to, but to be surprisingly feel good, being in the front group, being comfortable, and then having something out of your control is quite annoying. I mean, some will say punches aren't out of your control, but I think about 40% of the elite field punctured. Great course, beautiful place, but it's very demanding on the tires. So yeah, I was disappointed leaving there, but ultimately I still had two big goals to come. So it was like, oh, this is a shame, but let's
Yeah.
go to the Rotterdam man.
So tell me, you said surprisingly you were going well. Now, you and I had, and I want to come back to Tracker because I'm curious about the decision you made there, which would be not in your preferences to pull the plug on that. But you said you felt surprisingly good at Gralloch, and now we'd met earlier that week in the motorway services in Lancaster, very glamorous. And tell me about like how you were feeling then, because there was some stuff going on.
Yeah, it's fair to say I think overwhelmed would be the main words. Say I had a lot of off the bike work going on, a lot of stress around rebellion and the management of that. And it was my training wasn't going as well as I hoped. I was helping my sister move house that day. It was like the perfect storm. And I think it was the end of I think we ended last week's private diary talking about how I was beginning to get burnt out. And I think that burnout had just kind of like rolled and rolled. And meeting you in that service station was the kind of the burst out of everything. And kind of with the emotion which came with that, I really didn't know how I'd be at the race. And say surprisingly good. I think it was that kind of release of everything we spoke about. off air, which will stay off air a lot of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I think that Thursday we met was probably the lowest I've been in a long time. So I went into the route with no expectations. Because I always say a happy bike racer is a good bike racer. And
Yeah.
that weekend or that week I wasn't necessarily happy, I was just stressed. Um, but yeah, it was like the Growler it was what it was. It was I'm not gonna lie, it was very disappointing, but sometimes you just got to go, hey, it's gravel. And that was my first puncher in 18 months of racing gravel. So yeah, it was about time.
Yeah. Sounds like it was due. So you left the gravel in Scotland pretty quickly and headed over to Ireland for more familiar tarmac. Um, and like you went well at Raz last year, but I think this year it was kind of one of the things that you had in your mind that, yeah, I could win this.
Yeah, so last year was good. I was sitting third on GC until the final day when a break went up the road and I finished fifth, sixth, seventh on GC in the end, something like that. But I had in my mind I wanted to win it this year. Like I wanted to win the GC. And after my performance at Redlands at the start of the year, where I was third on GC, it made sense. Like the Rouse, I think it's fair to say, isn't quite the level of Redlands. So yeah, it's like it's a reasonable progression and reasonable expectation. Um, it was going okay. Like Queen stage, I was in the front group. Like I was sitting like 12th, 13th on GC, but on the same time as the podium, there was a couple of guys out front, thanks to a breakaway, like 20 seconds ahead, whatever. But GC was still very much in striking distance. In fact,
Just tell us what Queen stage is, just for the people who are listening that might not be mad keen on cycling.
Queen stage is like traditionally the hardest stage, so it's the most elevation. I was there was this horrible climb in the middle of the most beautiful part of Ireland, and there was maybe five guys went over on the front, and I was 4 or 5 seconds behind, and took a few risks on the descent to get back in. And then there was a group of 15, 20 of us at the front of the race, which were not working very well, but that's another conversation for another race tactics, whatever. But I was the only rebel man there and just rode relatively defensively, trying to choose the right moves. And yeah, so I left stage two that was in a very good position overall. Stage three was going to be quite a calm, nothing going on stage, which are always the most dangerous stages. And danger is kind of what happened. I ended up having a nice date with the tarmac after a couple of hours, just coming back from getting a bottle, and out of nowhere somebody swiped my front wheel, and all of a sudden I was on the floor. Quite badly to be honest, say, but 2 weeks later now my shoulder's still a bit rough. Um, Sitting on the floor, I was pretty confident I broke my collarbone, or at least done my scapula or something, and I I just sat there for about 90 seconds, which is quite a long time in a race. Usually you get straight up and go, right, I'm in the GC battle, let's go back. And our team car came over to us and I just said, I'm done, I'm getting in the car. And to their credit, they kind of put my bars straight, talked me around. I was like, come on, you can still finish the stage. So with a fair bit of illegal drafting behind the team car to get back into the bunch, I I made it back to like the first group or the first dropped group on the road. And I kind of knew in that moment that my race was done. It's like I lost 10 minutes overall that day thanks to the crash. I was in quite a bad place physically after hitting the tarmac. And there was bigger goals in Unbound, but it was quite hard making the decision to pull out of the race, which I eventually did. Because when it's a season target and when you think you're capable of winning overall, um, it's hard to leave. And it's one of those that sometimes like the best decision isn't the easiest decision. And I could have started stage four, but I'd have been worse off for it. So ultimately we made the going against my preferences to step away and be a little bit more protective.
Yeah. What I'm curious about now, so now we're at a point where Gralloch, you DNF'd, you've pulled out of Raz, and I'm curious now, like, what was your mental state, like getting on the plane, going to the US for Unbound?
It was surprisingly good. Um, it was, I think when I left, the Ros was rough. Like, I was struggling a little bit, but it was surprisingly good going over there. It was because I left the Ros with the mind of, so it was only 7 days out of Unbound at this point. And I left with like, right, let's recover the best I can for Unbound. It might even do me a little bit of good. Like I was lying to myself that maybe leaving the race early was better, whatever. But yeah, I went to Unbound with the okay, I'm not in 100% physical condition thanks to the crash, but no expectation is often when you go best as an athlete. And Unbound was, I was grateful to be on the start line, given I thought I'd broken a bone at the time. But it was one of those like, right, let's just go, enjoy it, race hard, and what will be will be. And I went in quite confident, quietly, that it'd
Yeah,
be a good day out.
yeah. I think that's great. I mean, that's like having that ability to just box off, um, you know, bad outcomes. Like what about your performance at Gralloch, your performance at Ros? It's like you were happy with your performance, like clearly unhappy with the outcome, but and like what I got a sense of, because we spoke before Unbound, was that you just moved on pretty quickly. It's like, well, that's not what I hoped for, but my performance was good. Next job, which is
Yeah,
is
it's
really
usually
strong.
yeah, I usually dwell on it quite a lot, and we'll come on to it in a second, but I am still dwelling on Unbound a little bit.
Yeah,
But with the Ros especially was very much crashes happen. That one was out of my control. If I'd have crashed myself out, I think it'd been very different. But given it that one wasn't my fault, it went down how it went down. It was very much a well, I can do nothing about it. Let's move on. And I think that's a degree of growing up as well, because I'd often dwell on the result or whatever. But
yeah,
it took a lot of confidence knowing that if I could be riding that well, while in my eyes not being at 100% physical condition, and the data shows that too, there was a lot of there's an awful lot of like, wow, if I can do this at 95%, like what can I do at 100%? So if anything, it was like conversely exciting.
yeah, yeah. Nice. I'm talking to a lot of kids at the moment who are doing A-level exams, and sometimes, despite being well prepared, they just don't go as well as you'd hoped. And that ability to just draw a line under things and clear your head and move on is like super important. But I'm getting a sense that there's still some like niggling around Unbound. Tell us about Unbound,
Yeah, Unbound was say I'm wearing the t-shirt.
which
Unbound
means you
did
finished.
well, you do get it before you start, but yes, I did finish. I'd say that's the only good thing which happened on Saturday was me finishing, to be honest. I punctured after about an hour and a half, and the pack dynamics were huge this year. There was maybe 50, 60 of us in the front group. And when the group's that big, it moves so fast. So in the first, they call them minimum maintenance roads. The first rough section, basically myself and a few others punctured, and it took me about 90 seconds, 2 minutes to change it, but the race was gone. And we pulled and we pulled and we pulled and we kept them close because we could see the helicopter focusing on the front group just in the distance. Um, but we pulled for about 2.5 hours and we kept them at about 4 minutes. And we was like, oh, if they sit up, we were lying to ourselves like maybe we get back. But after the first pit stop, aid station at 115k, so after about 80 kilometers, 50 miles of chasing, I just blew my doors. And it was a mentally very challenging day after that because when you punch an hour and a half into a 10.5 hour race, it was it was difficult. And last year, while I could relax into it and go, okay, I'm pissed off, but I can have fun. This year, us elites started so far ahead of the rest of the field that I was just riding around Kansas by myself. And yeah, like the Gralic and the Ros I got over quite quickly. Even now, Unbound, I'm I wouldn't say I'm over it. Like I've accepted what's happened, but I'm very frustrated still.
Well, why is that? Why is it? Why do you think it was different for Unbound?
Unbound's the Super Bowl, the Tour de France, the Olympics, the everything of the gravel world. It's the one everyone wants to win. Like it's the biggest race in the world. And like it was just frustrating because I think it was the fact that it was a hat trick of frustrations as well. Like it was Unbound not going well by itself is fine. Unbound not going well off the back of two other I was gonna say failures, they weren't failures, but from a results perspective they were.
Yeah,
And looking back, there's so many lessons from Unbound of I made so many mistakes, even when I was riding by myself, which my goal is to win the race in the next 3 to 5 years, it is good to know. But it's still like I'm a pro athlete, I'm motivated by results. So it's like there's only so many times you can go, oh well, that was a good lesson. Like you need the buzz of a result still. Um, and it was just I looked at the top 10, top 20, and don't get me wrong, I was not going to win the race. But they're all guys I've raced against and I'm competitive against. So it's
Mm.
one of those, oh, what could have been days. But yeah, it was 3 punches in the end, 4 or 5 plugs because they didn't seal. I rode on a flat tire to the second pit zone, and it was just, yeah,
Yeah.
mentally the most challenging day of my life from a bike racing perspective.
So then tell me, so what three things did you get out of it that were positive? Like the most challenging times, and in this case, mentally challenging. Um, that we generally learn something about ourselves. And I know we've already talked about this. The idea that you just have to pay your dues at an event like that, and you might be building up experience to really nail the big one. And the same thing happens in business as well. Like, you can go through a string of losses, and you just kind of paying your dues and really honing down performance so that you can really bring it when it counts. So if you had, yeah, three things that you learned from the experience.
I think from Unbound specifically, like you take a lot of lessons from the logistics side. Because even though my tires failed, I mean, quite badly, it wasn't a bad tire choice given the information I had. So I think trusting my instinct is still pretty good because I made a data driven choice. It didn't go my way this time, but like it made sense. And remembering that I made a decision for a reason. And then going against what I just said, I went against my own advice from a nutrition perspective and didn't take on enough water in the middle aid station. I had too much sodium. And that's a lesson which I did something similar last year at Unbound. And it's a 10.5 hour race. And that's a very long way to be doing anything. Like sit on the couch and watch a movie for 10.5 hours is long enough, let alone racing through the Kansas Flint Hills. So my nutrition was very, very important. And I messed that up a little bit. I think the final thing, I don't know if it's a lesson or learning, but just getting through the damn thing. It's like I was so tempted to just call it a day. Just like, oh, what's the point? I'm so far back. Um, but it was funny. It was emotionless when I crossed the line. It was just like, oh, cool. Which even now there's a degree of emotionless around Unbound. Like I'm a bit annoyed, but I just don't really know what to feel. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I learned for next year, I will do better logistically, planning, nutrition. But this year, it's just going to go down as a race, which was like, best way I can describe it, just meh. Like, I don't, it's quite difficult to explain for me.
I mean, what I'm hearing you, like the language I'm hearing is like you've got detachment around the result, which is probably quite a good thing. You've reflected on your performance and you've identified a couple of things that is like, yeah, that like I put that down on the even better if list. And that's great, right? I mean, you want to be detached from the outcome. When it goes against you, and like dwelling on the outcome and getting bent out of shape by it is probably not going to help focus on what comes next. So yeah. So what have you got coming next?
So next up is a couple of days more rest here in Boulder. Like just chilling, riding easy, and then I will head up into the mountains to go some exploring because it is gorgeous here. Then I head to Canada, just north of Toronto, a town called Collingwood for a UCI Gravel World Series. I DNF'd last year with a mechanical. I snapped my back wheel, so I have vengeance there and hope to go well and ultimately qualify for World Championships. Whether I go or not to Worlds, we'll make that decision closer to the time, but it'd be nice to qualify. Then it's over to Oregon. There's a 5 day stage race in the Gravel Earth Series called Oregon Gravel Trail Grinder, something like that. And it's going to be great because it's going to put me out of my comfort zone. The course suits me as an athlete, but you're camping every night and you're using different food. So you're not in an Airbnb shopping at what you know and everything. So I think it's going to be a great race, both to go for a result, but also to throw me out of the normal, okay, I have a smoothie at 9 o'clock, I do this at 10 o'clock, I go training at 11 o'clock. You're on someone else's schedule and someone else's ruling, which I don't know. I like to be in control, as we know, and as my spotlight shows. So I think it's going to be a good one to be like almost throw caution to the wind and have fun racing at. And then it's from there I go race some crits, which we will see how I go in crits after a month of racing gravel.
Yeah.
But
I love the idea of the stage race. Have a look at your spotlight profile before you go. I'm thinking it might be helpful to look at stressors, like when you can't control things, what's going to start to push your buttons. And when it does, and you start to feel sort of under pressure, like what strategies can you deploy to just sort of manage that pressure?
yeah, and
Can't wait to check in and see how the next block goes, Joe.
yeah, because for me, being aware of those stresses is the difference between being a good athlete and being a bad athlete. I think that's where I've really grown up in the last, probably much since leaving the road in the last 18 months, being aware when stuff's going wrong. And maybe I can control it, maybe I can't. So yeah, I think Oregon is going to be a great example of that. And yeah, hopefully a little more success results wise in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I'm very excited to go racing again.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, go well, and we're going to check in once. I guess once Oregon's done, we'll get together again and see how it went.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Cheers, Joe. Take care.
Cheers.